I'm so excited to have Shane Hazel here actually live with us right now. He's going to talk about Georgia. He ran for United States Congress over there. He's basically an activist, a former GOP candidate. I mean, he has got a lot going on, and he's also started his own radio program or podcast format. He's really getting involved in working to help make and bring actual change to his state and his community. Welcome to the Erin Cruz Show, Shane.
Erin, thank you for having me. It's been a while since we've talked, and I'm glad you're up and running and getting the voice out there again.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, that's something that I believe that Republicans are really struggling with, is keeping the communication flow going. The cycle goes, from one election to the next, and there are these lulls. We can't have lulls.
Exactly
We're up
right.
against the progressive left. So now, what is it you're up to right now these days after your race?
So we took about a month off, and obviously it was time to rest. We were running a full-time campaign
Yes.
on top of running a family and a full-time career out there in aerospace. And I'll tell you, it was just one of those things where we needed a little bit of time. But now we have launched a podcast. It's called Rebellion. We focus on the principles of peace, free markets, individual liberty, and constitutional government. And so we talk about those and we apply those to what's going on in the world out there. And we try to teach. And if we can get people to understand that we have a constitutional republic and that they have inalienable rights again,
Right.
It really starts to put our government back in that order, in that higher and lower echelon where the people are most powerful, the states, and then the national government. And that's what we're trying to teach people out there.
So it comes down to education, because what I noticed, I've been involved in politics for a long time. I've been an activist. I've been involved in the ground and party and different movements like the Tea Party as well. But what's missing is the education portion. It's really helping people to understand how this machine beast works and why.
That's exactly right.
And how the founders set it up and why. And why we have so much disconnect currently, and how do we get back to the basics. So that's really, really great that you're doing an education-based format, not just about the news.
Yeah, and that's what we get caught up with. You mentioned that we are up against a 24/7 news cycle, and there's so much information. The problem is there's very little knowledge. And if you're not working from a point of knowledge, you can't provide real solutions. Most of what they talk about at the federal level is so unconstitutional to begin with. There is few and defined powers that were set forth by the Constitution as a piece of legislation, a contract. And
Right.
that is contract law. If we can't have the states that are part of the contract abiding by the contract, and if the U.S. government has usurped our inalienable rights to grow their own tax base, basically, and their own powers, then we are never going to put this monster back into the change from which it was born from. And that's our mission here. And we do it in a fun and elevated way. I've got a great guy. He ran my campaign. His name is Banks Wise. You can find him on Twitter for now anyway, at @FBanksWise. But we sit here and we just bounce ideas across each other. We probably, between an hour and a half program.
Right.
And it's just, as much as we can do to even stop ourselves at about an hour and a half after just it's on the spot, it's not scripted, and it's a lot of fun to do.
Right. Well, that's amazing, and it's great to hear, because we have this 24-hour news cycle, and as a matter of fact, it's a tool that the progressive left is using. It's a mass propaganda tool, and it's diluting us. It's getting us as far back and away and empty as we can have with that real information we need to make decisions in our communities. For example, here in California, a couple of candidates have been on the TV on a major news network, and they mention this person's running for office. This person isn't just running for office. This person is running for United States Congress, for the House of Representatives, in a specific district to represent a specific community. They don't give you any of that. So if you live in a specific city, which is in a specific county, which happens to be within a specific district, you don't know, that this person is a potential for you to vote for. And so we see that the news media constantly is diluting things or making them so lack of knowledge there, really, that we need to be able to make decisions. It's just pathetic. And then they use the heartstrings, and they use the drama, and they use the shock factor.
Fear. And they use fear.
And fear.
Americans don't just give up their inalienable rights. They are compelled through fear, which is one of the most basic, hard-hitting emotions that we have. And so if an America is scared, we're supposed to be the free and the brave. We are neither one of those things in this day and age.
I am. You are. Maybe the main populace isn't, but I'm not afraid of anything. I'll tell you that, right. And I will fight to the core for anything that I need to do for this republic.
But as veterans, there is this call that we have, right? That oath, that Article 6, Section 3 oath of the Constitution that everybody takes. The president, down to your sheriff, everybody in the military takes that oath. And the problem is when everybody takes that oath and they have no idea what that oath means, or that, it's actually, they don't understand that it's part of the Constitution, then how on earth are they going to apply it when it comes time to make decisions on policy, or it comes to making decisions on where we're spending our money?
Not even just the decisions, but the judgment calls, because I think a lot of these things that are, decisions are being made, but they're being made off of judgment calls. You run across a conversation or something that, on the golf course by X person and X person, unless you really know where you're coming from and why, and the information behind those commitments you've made, those oaths you've taken, it's not going to hit you. It's not going to hit you and really take a space where you can step back and go, ooh, I need to take a look at this, and we need to make a certain judgment call. I mean, seriously.
Well, I'll tell you, if a knuckle-dragging, cran-eating Marine can figure out the Constitution,
you bet,
and teach the Constitution, there's no excuse why anybody else can't learn it. And that's one of the, like I said, that's one of the things that we are up against is having that in that application. And so when we look at things like the Kavanaugh hearing that's going on right now, it's all about policy, and these guys getting their sound bites so that they can go back to their districts and get reelected. And that's one of the biggest issues I have is, when we look at the third article of the Constitution, it is very small, and it is third for a reason. Judges don't rule. They are not lifetime appointments. They're there on good behavior.
No legislation for the bench. Nope.
Exactly
No legislating from the bench. Nope.
If we're not talking about the Constitution and getting those justices to say, hey, listen, I'm going to turn to the Constitution on every decision we have to make, then obviously those aren't the good choices. But instead, we've got this charade where people are out picketing in front of the court system instead of going out in front of Congress and doing all of the protesting that they're supposed to do. And Ben Sasse kind of handled that very eloquently during one of his speeches during the Kavanaugh hearing. So that's what we're really looking at is this basic premise of, how do you do this? How do you start to insert it into your local, neighborhoods, your state at that level? Because most people don't understand, and most people will say, oh, it's not my congressman. It's not my congressman. Yes, it is. And just to give you an idea, down here in Georgia, one of the reddest states in the entire union, we have one congressman who rates a 90% or above from Conservative Review or the Freedom Index. Mm-hmm. The Freedom Index is a constitutional metric. CR is a conservative metric.
Right. And
everybody else who's either a senator or a congressman from the state of Georgia as a Republican rates somewhere in the 60s and 50% in terms of their voting consistency with the Constitution. So I would say, if you're out there, go check these out. Go check out the Conservative Review. Go check out the
Well, you're
Freedom
talking
Index.
Actually, I'm sorry, I said moderates. No, you're talking about where they stand in terms of the Constitution. So that's different. No, that's that's not moderates. Those are social values. This is as it relates to the Constitution. That's interesting. And I think what people also need to recognize is, back to the fundamental issues of the Constitution and how the United States Congress works. Just because, Shane, you are in Georgia and you are in a specific district there, what you do, the decisions you make, the bills you put together, you vote on, they impact my life here in California. It's a federal seat. Of course I wouldn't, if you decide to run again, I wouldn't be able to vote for you. But the point is, we should all take an interest in where these electeds stand in terms of the U.S. Constitution and getting back to the basics and serving the people that elected them. So I'm glad to hear that you're educating people. So now, what are you going to run for Congress again? Is this something that you're thinking about, or are you?
That's a $1 million question. I'll tell you right now, I find a lot of gratification and a lot of fulfillment behind this microphone in terms of getting out and speaking to the people, bringing this type of education, which we could definitely do with that platform in Congress. The problem is right now, in terms of what's going on out there in the in the political realm, we have a census coming up in 2 years, in 2020. Mm-hmm. In 2022, there will redistrict. If for some reason we do run in 2020, we're probably, we do pretty well, I think. After building the name recognition we did this time, and then obviously with the rebellion and growing it through this podcast. But it's out there. I'm not saying either way. I'm maybe 50-50. I don't know. It's at this point, it's almost like if people want us to run again, I think it might take a drafting at this point.
Well, if the people want you to run again and make it happen, that's what they want. It comes down to the people, right? If they want you to represent them, make that known, and perhaps that could happen. But do you're finding then? It sounds like that you're finding from your work now that you're making impact. An impact that you maybe wouldn't even be able to make if you were in Congress. And in fact, you're able to really get down to the nitty-gritty with the people and educate them. So that's an upshot too, right, to doing what you're doing.
So right now we're at about 2 days a week. Usually we air Mondays and Fridays. And so for an hour and a half, we can just pour this concentrated mixture of principle of peace, free markets, and individual liberty, along with a constitutional framework on how all this works. And one thing I'd like to point out to your listeners is our federal government is supposed to look outward. It was never supposed to look inward. And we glean this through the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, because when we go back in history, we created 13 individual and sovereign states on par with Great Britain, France, and Spain, so that they could conclude war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. Those 5 things, and that is all that we were ever supposed to do at the federal level. So when we came together, we formed this little union that we had. It was, all right, you're going to be strapped down by this contract. The contract then created the federal government, and so that contract has to be honored by every state. And so what they were supposed to do is be that foreign emissary: war, peace, negotiation, foreign commerce, and be the citizens to our daily affairs. That's why they codified that in the 9th Amendment, so that every right that wasn't put in the Bill of Rights was still ours. And then obviously 10th Amendment, where we reserve all powers not specifically delegated, and mostly Article 1, Section 8, to the Congress, back to the states. And so that's when you start to look at the bigger picture that way, and then anything outside of the Constitution per Article 6, Section 2, if it's not pursuant to that Constitution, it's of no force. It's void. And I think it was Madison in Federalist 45. He said the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined, and those which are to remain in the state.
Let's say that again.
Indefinite.
Few and defined.
Defined is the key word. So when they talk about clauses like the General Welfare Clause or the Commerce Clause or the Interstate Clause, all that's nonsense. A clause is not defined. It is broadly generalized government. And so what clauses do is they define powers, not the other way around. So when they start to cite,
one serves the other, right?
Exactly right. So when they start to cite, a clause as being their ability to do something, are wholeheartedly lying to you and fabricating so that they can grow outside of their constitutional needs.
Right. It reminds me of the difference between a law and a policy. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. The policy can't go outside of. It shouldn't go outside of the law. Just because there's a gray area doesn't mean you should be abusing it.
Well, and how are we responsible for what bureaucrats come up with versus lawmakers. Lawmakers are only those 435 souls that are in the Congress, and that's it. Outside of that, I mean, you add the 100 senators, so you're up to 535. Outside of that, nobody should be making any type of legislation. And here's the thing is the governors, the attorney generals at your state level, and even down to your locally elected sheriff, if those feds get outside of their lane, they have the ability to push back and say enough is enough. So when you're electing your attorney generals, your governors, your sheriffs, ask them, will you push back against the federal government when they are outside, and not have any of this this Nuremberg to defense? Well, the law is the law. We've got to uphold the law.
I mean, we've seen this. We've actually seen this several times in recent years under Obama specifically. You know, in the case of some land issues with the Bureau of Land Management and some other things. You know, we've seen it, and we've seen sheriffs stand up, and we've seen the federal government really, and these lawsuits are still going.
Sure they are. Yeah, and the great thing is that the people are winning. You know, they out in Nevada they won. They were absolutely recused of any type of crime. They were pardoned by President Trump. You look at what happened to poor Lavoy Finicum. When he stood up to the government, the government murdered Lavoy Finicum in cold blood to show you do not stand up against the federal government in the United States. The problem is
Bundy, and I mean, there's so many that, and even the nameless, the ones that haven't made the papers, because I think localities, you know, these small areas, they're afraid. They're literally because of some of the actions that have been taken. But I'm glad that the sheriffs are pushing back in many cases, and that the law is standing on the side of many of these individuals. But we have to exercise where necessary to make sure that the federal government stays in its place. So now I want to ask you, you know, we only have a few more minutes here.
Sure.
You know, where can people get more information about your platform and in your program and get involved?
You can follow us on Twitter at Shane T. Hazel with a T as in Tango. You can follow F. Banks Wise. He's my co-host. We are at Rebellion Pod, just like it sounds, and we're Star Wars dorks, so that's why we kind of incorporated it into the name. But between those two sites, and if you have any questions, if you want to contact us, info@rebellionpod.com, they can get us there. And really, the best place to keep up with us is either on Facebook or Twitter. Rebellion is on Facebook as well, and so you can contact us at any of those. And please do follow us. We need to do a whole lot of education. We've got to get this into the mainstream, so the more people that we have out there that we can affect, that we can teach to go out and be disciples of this message of freedom, peace, in free markets, boy, it has a domino effect. And I think people are hungry for that. It's nature's law, right? And
I believe that people are hungry for truth. And I know that even our youth, many of them are starting to look at the conservative values and principles that are out there, moving away from that progressive left ideology of anything goes and, you know, even anarchy. You know, they're moving away from that because they're realizing that the mainstream media, these other outlets, other, you know, aspects that are feeding them, indoctrinating them, are not giving them truth. And this is the information age. We have a lot of information out there, but sometimes we need people like you and others to help people get back to the basics, learn the fundamentals, really build out their knowledge base so they can be more effective, because there are a lot of lies and disinformation out there. And I'm just so glad there are people, you know, that you are doing this and that your co-host is helping. And sure, we definitely want to be a part in any way we can to help get out your message. And people, if you're listening, get connected and give him a shot, give him a chance. Shane is awesome.
Take the 5-episode challenge. You'll be hooked, I guarantee you.
Yeah, and when you do get addicted to Shane's podcast, share it with your friends, because this is all about connecting patriots, really.
It is.
We have to remain united, even if we don't agree on every issue. Even if maybe fundamentally there are some things we really are a little polar opposite on, we have to unite for the future of our republic. So,
amen.
Well, thank you again, Shane, for coming on the show. We want to have you on again in the future.
Absolutely.
Sound good?
Yeah. You give me a shout anytime, Erin. You know, and I really appreciate the platform. I appreciate you getting out there. And we've recorded this as well, so we will get it out to our listeners as well, so that they can follow you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shane. God bless.
God bless. Thanks, Erin.
To hear more and to learn more on how you can make an impact or about the Erin Cruz Show, visit us online at erincruz.com. That's ERINCRUZ.com.